because AI is now, again, the buzzword, but it's also the reality, I think, is to become a fast follower, a fast learner. And again, in tax, we have the mindset, we have the attitude, because if you don't learn in tax, I mean, you're out of business in 2 to 3 years.
I just had a very good conversation with Wim Wuyts, who is the global CEO of WTS and has a very impressive and long-lasting in-house tax career. And we discussed what it takes to apply sustainable tax behavior in a chaotic world. We also discussed the top challenges for in-house tax leaders these days, which include, among them, retaining, attracting, and developing talent, securing budget for running your global tax operations, and obviously as well dealing with the sheer complexity of the global tax regulations. So I can highly recommend to listen to this podcast and learn about all the valuable insights that Wim has shared with us. Welcome to another episode of Tax Leaders Unplugged, where we go beyond the numbers and the rules, delving into the essence of leadership in the tax world. I'm your host, Stevi Frooninckx, and our focus isn't on tax technicalities, it's on the people behind them. Join us for in-depth conversations with leading in-house tax professionals, exploring collaboration, team management, and career development. And stay tuned for unique insights and advice that you won't find on Google, tailored to enhance your tax leadership journey. To the entire audience listening in, I hear you thinking already. I know this person on screen, Wim Wuyts, the CEO of WTS Global. I hear you thinking like, why is this global CEO of WTS Global online here? Why is he in the podcast? Well, I'll explain to you. Wim is indeed now the global CEO of WTS, a tax advisory firm. And this is maybe a bit misaligned with the focus of our podcast. However, before, Wim has had a very impressive and long-lasting in-house tax career of over 20 years with tax leadership roles at Bekaert, Agfa, Levi Strauss and Bekaert. And he started his career in the very beginning at the Belgian tax authorities even. And then he worked in the advisory at Arthur Andersen before going in-house. And in parallel with all these in-house and advisory activities, Wim has chaired the tax committee of the Belgian Employers Federation as well. And on top of that, if that's not enough, he's also the founder of the International School for Tax Leadership at Fontainebleau. Next to that, Wim is a lecturer at different business schools and is an author of books. And also, again, if that's not enough, he's the founder of L.arena, which is organizing art festivals internationally. And he's a board member at the Brussels Africa Hub. And finally, Wim is based in Belgium. Wim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stevie. Actually, I'm based in Kent, and the people who know me know that I make a point out of that. So, all joking aside, very happy to be here.
Thanks for precising that, Wim.
Yeah.
Tell us the secret. How can one person do all of this? Like, you are a CEO of a global advisory firm, you are into art, you are involved in business schools. How can you combine all of it? And what is driving you to do all of this?
That's probably the question that I get most often at the reception of other events that I talk, and I like to answer that question. And because I'm not Superman. I'm not Superman at all. I sleep my 8 hours. I do all the things that other people do. But what is, I think, the reality behind is that it's all interconnected. So what I do at WTS Global, what I do with L.arena, what I do with the leadership programs that I led at Fontainebleau for many years, it's all interconnected. Also the Brussels Africa Hub. And that makes it easy to get it going. And what is behind, and that is probably the most important thing, and I will come back to that. This is only possible if you really have a trusted team behind. If you have a few people that you can trust blindly, and blindly is probably the most important word, so that you work really integrated, smoothly, trusted, and you know that everybody is in for the good. And next to that, you need to have, in my opinion, you need to have your foundation right and solid, family, friends. And my friends so far still tolerate what I'm doing. And as long as they do, family and friends, then I'm happy and fine as well. But just to give maybe one example on how that all interlinks and connects, one example is the Brussels Africa Hub. And the Brussels Africa Hub is a platform, a forum led by Mukhtar Ba, that makes the bridge between Brussels, Europe, and Africa. And with that community and WTS Global, we have now built roundtable conferences every quarter where we bring the diplomatic scene, the African diplomatic scene, to the European Commission together. So all ambassadors to the European Commission or to Belgium, we bring together to look at the Global Gateway Program. The Global Gateway Program is the EU investment program, 150 billion that is going into the region, the continent, and where we then as WTS Global, we are represented in 52 of the 54 countries, can help rolling out that program for private, publicly owned organizations. So it's all intertwined, all interlinked, and that makes it working. And for sure, we have a very strong team and very strong wingmates on site.
All right, and I get that connection and how it is intertwined or interlinked, as you say. But what about L.arena? How is that linked to all of the rest? That's for me a bit a question still.
Well, L.arena started in the dark days, I would say, of the COVID period, where we were all in our home offices and where creativity was sometimes not that easy to let it go. But in that period, I wanted to go back to the basics of teaching, to the basics of leadership development, and start teaching on leadership, on having impact, back to old school teaching with a chalk and a blackboard. No PowerPoints, no flashy stuff, just talk and conversations. And that grew to a community that we have now built in the last 2 years, where we indeed go to international art festivals, as an example. We go to Tuscany, we go to Venice, we had events in Ghent, we had events in Brussels, and where we bring young leaders, young professionals together who have already impacted society, but who we believe by connecting them and bringing them in a holistic environment where we look at the arts, at philosophy, science, entrepreneurship, that we can accelerate them in having impact. And it's people working at large multinationals, at the Commission, at the NGOs, neurosurgeons, architects, and into a very diverse community, not only in gender or nationality, but also in backgrounds. And they have impact, and they will have more impact in future, and that's what we try to do with L.arena. And actually, just one line of ad, the enrollment is open for our summit in Tuscany in July, and people in your organizations can enroll until May 10 for the program in Tuscany.
All right.
But that's all on the side. Let's talk tax, Stevi.
I thought you would say that tax is also more art than science, and that maybe was a link. But is that so? The activities that you're having outside of your tax profession, and then in particular maybe the art arena, is that bringing something back to you as a tax person? Is that enriching you in one way or another? Or is it mostly network, or are you then, let's say, gaining insights that you apply then on your day-to-day job as well?
Yeah, it is. In the beginning, I was a bit, I think, naive. And I thought, well, I have experience and I'm going to bring it to the world. I'm going to bring it to the next generation. I'm going to bring it to the Africa Hub. But actually, by getting into L.arena in the Brussels Africa Hub in Plus Us, and I'll talk a little bit about Plus Us as well, I learn more and I get more insight that I give back. So it's a two-way street, and that's also one of the things that I think what is important in building tax departments and tax firms, in-house tax departments for the future. And I talked about that at the CFO Summit yesterday at Vlerk here in Ghent as well. I believe to keep up with the speed of change and also in technology, and you're one of those front runners that I also really admire, Stevi, as you know. You're one of those front runners, but in order to match experience I would say, age, older. With the technology that is coming out there, I think you need to pair up, you need to have reverse mentoring in place, that you have insights from the upcoming generation and generation that is already there, with the experience that we had in the more old school analog world. And if you can combine those also in a tax function, then I think you're set up for winning, to make impact and move on. So that's in tax, that's in any function. It's finding that two-way street to learn and to develop. That's the only, in my opinion, for me at least, the only way to keep up with the speed of change that we are seeing now and the complexity.
So are you then saying that you're actively seeking and pursuing to be surrounded by obviously diversity, but then younger generation, more tech-savvy generations, to make you then a better or future-proof a bit your tax skills? Is that's right?
It's indeed, it's making yourself future-proof, I think. Also when you like a head of tax, which certainly had in past 15, 20 years experience before you get to the chief of tax officer function. That was in a way easier than nowadays. There was but less change. Also, I think we tax professionals, we are used to basically yearly change and worldwide. I mean, budget rounds, government budget impacts was every year, in every country. So we are geared up, wired to deal with change. But you need, I think, to also connect with the new worlds, which if you close them off, it's gone. AI, legal tech, tax tech, and some platforms. I think that's clearly the future. Log tax, and we had multiple conversations on that, Stevi, and also with your teams. Platform-driven organizations, also tax functions. I think in future, if you take crystal ball, if you build a tax function from scratch, certainly the smaller ones, I believe, not the conglomerates, but the smaller ones, mid-size, $1 billion in revenue, $5 billion in revenue, and you need to reinvent the tax function. I think nowadays you need to start from the platform and build from there the organization, the processes, and strategy and the governance. In my opinion, that's the difference with past. I think where you started basically from the organization and the processes. I think in future you will have to start from platform.
Yeah, I'll come back to that in a minute. Maybe first of all, because now as the CEO of WTS Global, I'm wondering, looking at your 20 years in-house, again, it's very impressive with like Agfa, Bekaert, Baxter, Levi Strauss. What made you make that career switch? What inspired you, or what was your motivation to exit in-house and go back to advisory?
So the question is, how could you be so stupid, right? How could I be so stupid to go back to advisory, jump the fence, and being back at the billable hours and the timesheet where many of you, I'm sure, here in the audience, and I know some of you,
the large majority, I'm pretty sure,
run away from, right? So I also ran away from that when I was at Elvis. No, kidding aside, but so how could I be so stupid to move back to advisory? I was happy in my role at Bekaert. It was 10 years at Bekaert, leading the tax department with a fantastic team. And that's also, I think, what we should do in tax function is always build a team, and successors should come out of your team. That's, I think, a measure of success. If you need to recruit your successor outside, I'm not sure. So I always had the aspiration with Geert Vulstig at Agfa, with Flavia Leone at Bekaert, that the successor was also always coming from within, but that's on the side. So 10 years at Bekaert, setting a department, being in an M&A team, at the end, Chief Transformation Officer. So why moving? And that's like it goes in life. You get a call and you start talking, and then you're gone. But it's not that simple. I always believed that after the fallout of Andersen, after the Enron scandal, that the world of global tax advisory was too small. I mean, we went from Big 6 to Big 5 to Big 4. And I always said back in that period that also because of audit conflict, that if you're on a complex deal, sometimes it was even hard to find an advisor that was not conflicted. You do a multiple country joint venture deal, both parties have an auditor. If you want to work with the Big Four, there were two left, and one of them you had to connect or no connect. So it was hard to find a truly trusted advisor that could always be on your side whenever, wherever. And then before I started WTS Global, I always believed that a kind of a new Anderson had to stand up. Tax only, that was clearly no audit, because that conflict will be there clearly and will be there for the next many years. And we have seen with EY how difficult it is. I have a lot of respect for EY, that may be clear, but how difficult it is to unwind even, or to split an organization between audit and consulting, because also the teams are interwoven. So I had to believe that there should be a new or multiple new advisory firms in tax that have global representation and that can be at the table of multinationals size a few billion to 10, 20 billion, conglomerates, do project work, maybe not global engagements, but to project work. And that drove me to WTS Global now almost 7 years ago. And we're indeed with leading firms in the country under their own brand for the time being, and we are working on a global brand because that's I think important. We make steps day by day, 1% a day, and eventually. But we are in 70 countries and at the table. So it was the drive to get an alternative to the Big Four, and we are way smaller, but we could start claiming, and we are having our space there.
Yeah, and obviously while you were in-house, I mean, if I look back at my advisory period and then my in-house period, I moved because while being in advisory, I missed the fact of implementing stuff, like really going beyond the advice.
Yep.
What is your view on that today, knowing that you have been in-house? Do you see ways that you can go deeper in the implementation? Can you be more with your team, more hands-on, more practical into things, the projects, the advice that you are running, that it is more tailored to being implemented? What is that a benefit that you have from your in-house period?
Well, it's and in other organizations and other firms, you have also people who were in advisory, go to industry and come back.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I was at Bekaert and at AGFA, I always had the experience that if one of those advisors had been within, he or she clearly knew what I was talking about when I talked about struggles. They knew if it's year-end close, don't call me. I mean, I'm in my tunnel of year-end close on the provisions and so on. If it's quarterly close, if I need to get buy-in from my CFO, from my board, and so on, it's not about tax. Quite often not. It's about change management. So it's having been within, that helps. But I always say the power is, and that's what I try. I'm still daily, weekly talking to tax directors, head of taxes, also to learn what is happening nowadays. The combination of someone who has been within with someone who has gone through the ranks of the law firm or the advisory firm, that is the power. So when I go out with to companies, to head of taxes, to tax directors, it's that combination that I can give the reality check. And sometimes I see also in our teams, I see advisors, lawyers with a lot of seniority go like off track on quoting court cases and quoting really detail, where a tax director wants to know, but it's not important in the decision taking. And that's, I think, it's about decision taking.
Yeah, clear. So you said that you talk on a probably daily, weekly basis with a lot of in-house tax teams and tax leaders. Tell us a bit, like what are the hottest struggles that you hear today? What's top of mind for in-house tax leaders in terms of challenges, struggles?
So I made a joke, and you asked why were you jumping from in-house back to industry, to advisory. But if I look back, I mean, the complexity in the last 5 years has grown so fast, and the governance and transparency which is needed. I mean, that is not the point. In the reporting side, the Pillar 2 tsunami, which is ridiculously complex. I mean, and we learned it together with our teams, and then we are advising and implementing Pillar 2. But the complexity is ridiculous. I mean, I understand, and there was the need for a global minimum tax and fairness, and label it all you want, and you can have philosophical different views on that. But how it was is implemented, I mean, is unseen. So the complexity has grown over the last 5 years. The challenge that I see is twofold, and it's not on the technicality, because in-house, I want to say we are smart enough to deal with that upcoming legislation all the time. But it's the search for budget in the organization, and like in any organization, budget rounds or negotiation rounds or fights for getting a bigger piece of the pie. But then once you have the budget, it partially goes to advisory, but also to building the team. Is the struggle, and I think this is what I hear at least, and I would like to test it in the audience here, is to find the right people. And the question is even stronger or different than in the past. What is the talent? What is talent today? What is tax talent today? It is, in the past, it was clear. Tax talent in the past was you had your uni degree in law or economics, you did a master in L&M in international taxation, you spent a few years in advisory, wherever, and then you went into industry, and then you were ready for your career. Basically, that was talent, and the person who could tick those boxes was geared up to leadership positions in tax. I'm not sure whether that's how you develop as a tax professional nowadays. What does technology do to talent and to organizations? I was out with your team, Stevi, here in Ghent as well. Well, Ghent is bizarre, but anyhow, so I was here with your team, and your team as well is so diverse in backgrounds, technology, tax, storytelling, branding, and that is also, I think, the reality that we need in-house tax functions. You need people who are tech savvy. You need people who can communicate, who can bring the story. You need people who can manage an ecosystem. And then on top, you need to understand the law, and you need to be able to keep your organization compliant. So what is the definition of talent for the future? I think a lot of thinking has to go into that. And from there, development needs to be reinvented as well. So the technical skills, I mean, you can have in the University of Lausanne, you can have it in Vienna, you can have it in Leiden, you can have it here in Solvay, Vierik, but the pepper and salt to be truly impactful in future in tax, I think we need to reinvent as we go, with in-house, with platforms, with advisory. We need to reinvent the development of talent for the future.
Yeah. So if I summarize that, so you said it's the overall complexity, which is obviously top of mind, Pillar 2, and anything beyond that.
Yes.
There is then in general talent and development, but you also said securing budget as a tax team. If we zoom in on securing budget, like what would be your key tips that you typically give to tax leaders to ensure that the CFO gives them the budget that they need? Any practical things that you can share?
But I always used a matrix, and on one axis there was people, and you had good people, top people, and Champions League people. Then you had the axis budget, low budget, medium budget, and high budget. And then it was like a decision by the CFO and its team, and to say, okay, where do you want to play? Do you want to play and really build a state-of-the-art tax function for the future? Meaning you need to have the talent and you need to have the budget. If you agree on that, that's the upper bucket. Then indeed I need ABC for my budget, and I need to recruit 1, 2, 3 in my organization. If your CFO or your audit and finance committee says, well, if we are compliant, that is enough. Don't be the front runner in everything. Just keep the boat afloat, because we need to invest. We are willing to take, it's also an equation of risk. We want to take maybe more risk, less governance, less policy, and so on. So we play in a lower box. Then that's a decision. That's a decision of the CFO. That's a decision of maybe the audit and finance committee. But I think it's mapping in that matrix with your CFO to say, okay, let's agree where we want to play. State-of-the-art tax organization, legacy for the future, or just keeping the things afloat, minimizing the risk and nothing more. And as soon as you have that conversation and the things clear, then the budgetive discussion gets easier. Because most CFOs would say, I want to have a state-of-the-art tax department, and say, okay, then we're going to invest.
Yeah, and that is, I find that surprising, because I would expect that these days a lot of CFOs will be more about like SG&A savings and a penny saved is a penny earned. And
Yeah.
how would you help tax leaders that want to inform the CFO that maybe there is a need to be in the Champions League or in the Premier League, but the CFO thinks that it's okay that we are in the lower divisions?
Yes, but the old school method was to look at the effective tax rate, and you say, what is the value that is created by the effective tax rate, and to get to a certain lower effective tax rate, we create value, earnings per share multiplied by the multiple, and you create value. So shareholder value creation. That's nowadays way more difficult to structure to get a consistent lower effective tax rate. But then it goes, I think you make the link to what I see happening now more and more, and rightfully, is to make the link to sustainability, to good governance, to environmental taxation, to say, okay, we as an organization, we claim, and that's quite often, and is it greenwashing or is it reality? We claim to be, to develop a company that is really sustainable, that is really best in class in sustainability. What does that mean for tax? For tax, that means the right governance, the right infrastructure, the right platform, the right policies, the right team. Because tax is contributing to society, is driving budget of state, and there you go. So the link to sustainability, I think, is nowadays more the bridge to having the right team and the right budget, whereas in the past it was probably the effective tax rate. But the story is, I think, is combined. So it's a sustainable effective tax rate combined with having the right governance, the right policies through a platform or another way in place. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. But can I challenge you a bit? Like, I get that in the past, ETR was like the North Star metric, and it had a clear ROI, right? The business case based on ETR is super clear. It's controversial now, maybe even we don't do it anymore, maybe the US more than Europe, but
absolutely.
At the same time, things are changing, and then sustainable, responsible tax behavior is gaining importance. But how do you calculate the ROI of investing in that? What is the ROI of being a front runner in doing more than what is legally required from a sustainable and responsible tax behavior perspective?
I think it goes to, will you have in future the license to operate? And what do we mean with the license to operate is that your clients and clients were Champions League in sustainability will enforce the same standards on their suppliers. And yesterday, again, at the summit here at Vlerik, there were a few cases where, and it's mainly the big ones. It's the Unilevers and the Urstels and all the other big players, conglomerates, who really are front running in sustainability. They will push down the standards they have to work with them. Also for advisory firms, they will ask, do you have your act together on sustainability? If you're not qualifying or ticking the boxes in a correct way, you might be disqualifying for tendering, you might be disqualified to even talk to their procurement office. And tax, that's at least my personal belief, but it's philosophical debate maybe at this point in time, tax will be in the license to operate. So do you have the policies in place? Do you apply within the intent of the law? Is it in line with the CSRD developments? So tax will gradually move to the box of the license to operate. And the license to operate, I think, is one of the key fundamentals, because any organization is asking themselves, and that's something I learned from Peter de Keyser here in Belgium, will you be insurable in the future, investable, and will talent want to work for you in the future? And also tax will be part of that to be investable in future, bankable, insurable, attracting talent, you will have to have all your ducks in a row, and also in tax. But indeed, the ROI, it's difficult to qualify, to calculate. ETR was way more simple. That was.
Well, I think it's helpful that you make it so precise that indeed, if you want to build a business case, why we need to future-proof our tax function, why we need to transform it and go towards responsible and sustainable tax behavior, it's to what you're saying. I mean, let me summarize. It's in order to ensure that we attract talent in the future. So that is definitely something which you can build in the business case. It's obviously a business ticket to play, a business license to operate, as you say. It's to attract investments. So if you take all of those components, I think it might be helpful indeed to come to a more solid business case, to make it more tangible, because that is always the problem. Maybe on a similar topic, I heard you already talking on stage about making a sustainable impact in a chaotic tax world. I've heard you say so. Can you explain a bit further what you mean with it, and in what context you are using it?
Well, indeed, we are living in a complex, I think nowadays I would even say chaotic world. I mean, geopolitically, we all know what is happening in all the domains, climate change and so on. So complexity almost gets to chaotic environments, not in organizations, but I mean in the world reality as we live it. So how do you still move the needle in those domains from a tax point of view, and also in general? And for me, that boils down to living and dealing in an agile world. And agile is overly used. I know it's a I think in business schools we would call it the bullshit bingo. So each time you say agile, you need to pay bottle of champagne or whatever. But what does that mean? Is that you need to adjust your tax organization. You need to make it strategic, fluid. It means the environment is changing all the time. In a second line, you need to adjust your strategy to that change all the time. Global to pillar 2, pillar 1 maybe, if your organization is in that level. Sustainability, name it. So adjusting your tax strategy to that ever-changing environment. And then in a third move, make your organization fluid. So have your organization adjust and operations adjust all the time to the strategic change coming out of the environment. And lastly, and I need to top up, we teach that for 4 weeks when I'm in Fontainebleau as the framework, and do it in a keynote in half an hour. But then the last block is to assure that you still keep your team and your individual commitment with you. So as a tax team, I think it's building a culture, maybe a subculture in your organization, that you adjust your tax strategy all the time to the change of the environment, that you adopt your organizations and your operations all the time to that change in strategy, and that you make sure that you keep at least your team committed to that goal, and your stakeholders applaud. But the fundament, and that's what I bring in that when I talk about having impact, is dealing with dilemmas. I think if in my role, in our team, in-house tax, I think we should spend more time on dealing with dilemmas. And dilemmas will come more and more, also on the ethical side, when we talk about sustainability and so on. So how do you deal with dilemmas, with problems which do not have a binary solution, not a 0-1, not a yes or no, but where judgment call, but it's long-term thinking and putting stakes in the ground. That's what I mean with by having a sustainable impact, is develop again a team, yourself, to be geared up to keeping a North Star out there on where to go in a very complex world, in a very complex tax environment. That's in 2 minutes. Normally I need half an hour on that one.
If we replace agile by preparedness for upcoming change, then we are removed, or then we are
then we have the buzzwords.
The bullshit bingo. If we go for preparedness for change, what would you say, like the 3 top tips that you would have for in-house leaders? Like, okay, what can they do to prepare for change, whatever the change is?
Well, I think it's because AI is now, again, the buzzword, but it's also the reality. I think is to become a fast follower, a fast learner. And again, in tax, we have the mindset, we have the attitude, because if you don't learn in tax, I mean, you're out of business in 2 to 3 years. So it's keeping that mindset of fast following, fast learning, to keep up to speed in the changing world. What else do you need? I think you need to be now AI enabled, but you need to have to go on the learning curve, because I think that was the question. What are the tools that you need, your skills to play in the field? You need to go on that AI learning curve. I mean, experiment with it, look at it, what does it mean? And it will go beyond I think what we all have now, the wow factor. You type in a company, you add a buzzword, and you ask the ChatGPT to write an email to the CFO, and in 5 seconds or in 1 second, there is an email out where you say, that would have taken me 2-3 hours to write and to think. But that's Google 2.0. And that's important, and that will already be disruptive. But what are the use cases in our world of tax that will break also the challenge that we have on budget and on people, and we will always need super talented people and so on. But what are use cases in AI that would accelerate the tax function in-house? I think that's where I would like to start a bit of debate around, because that's where the discussion is. And some answers emerge, but not all yet.
All right. Clear. Thank you. I saw also that and I heard you talk about the sustainability, the tax sustainability index, that you developed at WTS, also, I think, with kind of a community with in-house tax leaders. Can you tell us a bit more about why you did it and what the value is of having such an index, what the next steps also are in this program?
Yeah, so we built within WTS Global a publicly available tax index. It's done with our hub from my team and our London-based practice, with the support of our European teams and so on, where we through 60 plus questions go through all the layers of E, S, and G, and where a regional tax director, the head of tax, can measure him or herself against a standard that we believe is the Olympic minimum. Because we got the question quite often, where do I start on ESG? I mean, I know the GRI 207, I know all the buzzwords out there, but if I'm new in an organization, especially when you're new, or you have to build a new team or you're a spin-off and so on, where do you start? But also going concern, where do you start in sustainability? And where do you have your strength and where do you have your weakness? So if you go to, if I can say, you can go to your website and you will see it, or if someone of our team is in the call, maybe we put it in the chat. But the initiative that Wim is promoting with the WTS Global Network are remarkable. If I need to stop talking about it, just tell me as well, because I don't want this to be an
explain a bit. Like I just
see it coming in. But the TSI, I mean, it's not a commercial thing, so it's a benchmark. 60 questions. You will see where you are. If you want, for sure, you can give us a call to go more detail in the report. But you will see where have I my weakness. And again, you can go to your CFO and say, okay, where do we want to play on the X people and budget, Champions League or Provincial? And then you make the choice, and you can build from a project management point of view. You can build your priorities and go build your sustainable tax function, your sustainable policy. So I think it takes 15 minutes if you really want to do it seriously. And then you get a report very light report within the day, and you can take it from there. Because the question was really, and I'm curious also in the audience, where to start. Because if you look at sustainability, and with our team and supported by and backed by AI, we try to keep the overview. But every discipline, from packaging tax to CBAM to renewable energy to subsidies and so on, it's almost an expert in the expertise that you need to find. So how do you keep track? And the question I got, is the tax department responsible for environmental taxes? Is the tax department responsible for CBAM? Is the tax department responsible for packaging tax? We see often, and that's, you ask, well, what are the stories like in packaging tax? We see often liabilities building up because nobody was picking it up in the organization. And all of a sudden there's a burning platform, nobody reported or reported wrongly. And then we get a call, and others get a call and say, can you first fix it? And can you then indeed bring it to policy? And if in another European country or across the world, similar tax is implemented, please alert us, bring it to a workshop and move it on. So it's keeping track on the complexity in the ESG, that we try to make it manageable with a dashboard, and allows you to build a project around it and have the conversation and the conversation as well in your organization.
Maybe if we spin the statement you made into a question, should in-house tax be responsible for environmental taxes? What is your boilerplate answer to that?
Should tax step into the environment? They should step into the governance, clearly. I mean, it's even the law that is driving, and it's mandatory law, and then there is best practice, and that's where you need to make the choice. On the S, I think if you want to build a culture, an inclusive culture, a diverse culture, with the right French benefits in place and so on, you need to step in. On the E, I talk to, and like you do and many do, you talk to a lot of in-house professionals. Some run away and say, no. And by the time I retire, it will be gone. I don't step into it. The ones that say, I want to lead the pack, and that's coming almost from the intrinsic motivation. And I heard again a few at the CFO Summit yesterday as well. Then they say, I claim it. In my organization, I'm whoever. I want to take the lead on everything that is E-related, and I'll talk with my CFO, I talk with my supply chain VP, and I talk to the ecosystem, and I'm going to claim the space. So it depends on the individual. And if you then allow me to do maybe one step out to the Plus Us movement that we created, Luc is writing, environmental tax paid to tax authorities are tax responsibility, at least in our company. And that's indeed, I think what you see is, I agree with Luc. If it starts with a T and it smells like tax, I think tax will be responsible if it goes wrong. So the question is, do you play it proactively or reactively? My answer is you do it proactively, you step into it, and you make indeed the strategic choices. So I agree.
So you would recommend that it is dealt with by the tax team, right?
Proactively, because if it blows up, it will come at your desk. I mean, it's like customs. Custom duties as well. We know who is responsible for custom duties, it's not tax, etc. But if a container is blocked in the port of Shanghai, they will call Luc or an equivalent and say, well, look, it starts with a T, so why is that container stuck in the port of Shanghai? can you solve it? If I can make one step out to Plus Us, Steve, if you still have 1 minute. Plus Us is because I didn't have enough projects on my plate. So Plus Us, we started with our team again a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, where we bring together top tax leaders initially in Europe to look at what is happening at the crossroad of sustainability, tax, and leadership. And if you look in the crystal ball 5 years down the road, where will tax be 5 years down the road? And we have built up a community so far with 40, 50 taught tax leaders, academics, NGOs, head of taxes, sustainability, tax professionals, very diverse community. We had already meetings at the headquarters of Ørsted. We had meetings in Brussels. We had meetings in Munich. And we will have our next meeting with Dennis Bayer at UCB in Belgium, but it's a European movement where we bring structure now. We will put a board in place. We will also do a leadership training 1 week. Bo Iverson, which many of you might know, will coordinate and lead with our team. We will have content chapters. So we are building a movement, Plus Us, that wants to drive societal change or transformation through tax. If people on the call or see the YouTube later on, if you're interested, drop me a mail, a WhatsApp, or someone in my team in the C office, and we will certainly reach out to you.
All right, Wim, in this podcast, we always want to give like a key takeaway to the audience in terms of things they should do to get the most out of their career. What is your one piece of advice you would offer to the audience, the in-house tax people who are looking to excel in their careers? What would you say your biggest piece of advice?
Work for the right people.
Clarify.
Don't compromise on who you work for. I mean, I think, and it's a tagline, but what I mean is if you're building a tax department, you build quite often a strong team with an own subculture quite often in the tax department, having impact in your organization, but also in society. And that block, that team, it needs to be anchored in with the CFO, and the CFO needs to support you. If you have a CFO that, is that my firework? If a CFO supports you, that's fantastic. When I worked at Bekaert, I worked for Bruno Emblé. Bruno Emblé was a CFO during the almost 10 years that I was at Bekaert. We had a kind of a dream team. Nobody left in those 10 years. It was shoulder to shoulder, good times, bad times. And that's what I mean. Work in a team where that is happening, or where you're building that, or where you have the aspiration to build that, or if you have a sub-team, a subculture, go in that team. Because at the end of the day, you also want to have fun. You also want to be in a trusted environment, and build that. That's actually what I want to say. Build a team and look for the right people up, down, and next to you and outside of the organization to build a trusted dream team.
All right. Maybe to end with a final question, I see an interesting one coming in from the audience. And I like the question because we discuss it also often with other tax leaders. Sometimes in-house tax teams, they need to pick up matters where, strictly speaking, they are not necessarily responsible for. Like the example here is given, electronic invoicing, e-invoicing, which obviously has a big link to the indirect tax domain. But other example could, for example, be the preparation of the statutory accounts, where we all know nobody in the organization is interested in local GAAP, but tax needs it. Or you could, for example, think about keeping the legal org chart lean. All those topics. Should tax take a proactive approach? What is your point of view? Is this something that tax needs to insource, or do we have enough on our plate and do we need to push it back to other stakeholders?
But I think it's the beauty of tax, and I try to step out a few times at AGFA and also at Bekaert, but I always came back to tax. Is in the tax function you see and learn everything from supply chain to procurement to M&A to name it. So we are across everything, which means that if everybody runs away from the table, it ends up on the table of tax. Statutory tax is a very classic one. Nobody cares. And then in a listed company, I mean, it's IFRS, it's US GAAP, it's stat accounts, it's someone in the field that just need to tick the boxes. But for us, it's important. That's an example. E-invoicing, the same. I think it goes back to that simple matrix. People budget. You go to your CFO, you say, we have there risk, or we have there an opportunity. We tax project management-wise, we can handle, because we know the organization, we know the supply chain, we know the controllers in the field, we know basically the entire ecosystem. We can deal with it, but I need one person and I need 100K to make it work. So I think that's how I took it. And if they say, well, I don't have the budget and you don't get the resource, then you leave it in the middle, and the liability is, or the accountability is with your CFO, and he needs to find another bucket. But again, and that brings it back, if you have a good team like we had at Bekaert, and also at Agfa, and the other organizations I work, you have mature conversations around it. It's not the CFO says, here, Wim, stat accounts, it's your thing, just get it done. You don't get people and you don't get budget. Then it stops. But with all that talking, Steve, maybe I should jump the fence again to in-house. I mean, why did I go back? No. I'll stay and I'll make it work, and with a team at WTS Global, and that's how I started. And so how do I keep it all together? It's the team, it's my team, and certainly you know a few of them as well, Stevi. Sometimes it's hard work, it's challenging work, it's uphill sometimes. And I always say it's only when you look back in your career that the line is straight. While you're in, it's very bumpy, it's very hectic, and it's only when you do a stop and you look back and you say, well, this was a straight line. My career was not a straight line. It was very bumpy.
I think this is a perfect conclusion of the episode. So I'm convinced now it was the right thing to invite you for the episode. Despite you not be having an actual in-house tech background right now, or an actual in-house tax role right now, you brought a lot of value for the audience, for the in-house tax people. So thanks a lot, Wim. Thanks to the audience for the great questions, and let's see each other next time. I just had a great conversation with Wim Wuyts, and this person has a very impressive tax career, where he's currently the global CEO of WTS, but has more than 20 years of in-house tax experience that he brings to the table. And we discussed, among others, what it takes to apply sustainable tax behavior in a chaotic world. We also discussed the top challenges that tax people are having today, among them dealing with the sheer complexity of the regulations, securing budget from the CFO to run your global tax operations, and also what it takes to retain, attract, and develop talent in your team. So if you want to learn more, you definitely need to listen to this podcast.